Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 945 days, Ukraine stands strong against the forces of the Russian invasion. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy continues his visit to the US, reports Ukrainska Pravda. During his speech at the UN General Assembly, the president warned that he recently received alarming intelligence information that Russia is preparing strikes against Ukrainian nuclear power plants, as well as their infrastructure, in order to disconnect the plants from the power grid. According to Zelenskyy, Moscow uses satellites of third countries when planning these attacks. Earlier he said that these were Chinese satellites. The Ukrainian leader called on the international community to put pressure on Russia and restrain it from shelling, which would pose a threat to Ukrainian nuclear energy. The head of state reminded that as a result of the Russian attacks, all Ukrainian thermal power plants and a significant part of hydroelectric power plants were destroyed. So potentially millions of people could be left without central heating in winter. 80% of energy generation was destroyed. Quote, "This is how Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is preparing for winter. He hopes to torment millions of Ukrainians. Ordinary families, women, children, ordinary cities, ordinary villages. Putin wants to leave them in the dark and cold this winter, forcing Ukraine to suffer and surrender," unquote, the president said. Zelenskyy insisted that a just peace in Ukraine could be achieved via following his peace formula. He stressed that Ukrainians will never accept that the colonial past can be imposed on Ukraine instead of a just peace. In his speech at the UN General Assembly, he outlined the main points of how he sees peace being achieved: nuclear safety, food security, bring home all captured soldiers and civilians, guarantee territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, withdraw the Russian occupiers, thus ending hostilities and hold those responsible for war crimes accountable. Earlier, in an interview with the US media, Zelenskyy said he believed the war with Russia is closer to the end than many people think. We would really appreciate if you could rate us, ideally with 5 stars, and leave a glowing review in the app where you are listening to this podcast: Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and others. This really helps more people to find out about the highlights from Ukraine and truth about Russia's invasion. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy found himself in the middle of a scandal in the US. Over the weekend, Zelenskyy toured a weapons manufacturing facility with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, an ally of Kamala Harris, which upset some Trump supporters given that the visit took place during the election campaign. Americans of Eastern European origin, including those with Ukrainian and Polish roots, have become a sought-after group of voters for both parties, particularly in Pennsylvania, which has a substantial Polish and Ukrainian population. On Monday, Donald Trump declared that Zelenskyy wants the Democrats to win the 2024 US election. The Ukrainian president had intended to present his victory plan to Trump during his visit to the US. However, the Associated Press has reported that Trump has not scheduled any meetings. Moreover, Trump accused Ukraine's president Volodymyr Zelenskyy of casting quote-unquote nasty little aspersions on him. During a campaign event in North Carolina, Trump devoted a substantial portion of his address to Ukraine, singling out Volodymyr Zelenskyy for criticism. Quote, "The president of Ukraine is in our country. He is making little nasty aspersions towards your favorite president, me," unquote, Trump said without specifying what he meant. He accused President Joe Biden and his election opponent Kamala Harris of giving billions of dollars to Zelenskyy, who refuses to go for a deal. Trump got the duration of Russia's full-scale invasion wrong and significantly overestimated the death toll. He claimed that after 3 years of horrible fighting, Ukraine is absolutely obliterated and that millions and millions of people are dead. He also claimed that all its 1,000-year-old cities except Kyiv have been destroyed. Trump declared that most of the country is gone and that Ukraine as a whole no longer exists. Quote, "Ukraine is gone. It's not Ukraine anymore," unquote. He blamed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for a bleak picture he painted, claiming they, quote, "won't be satisfied until they send American kids over to Ukraine," unquote. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the US House of Representatives, refused to meet Zelenskyy as well, claiming that his schedule is too busy. At the same time, he released a letter to the President of Ukraine demanding him to immediately fire Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. Johnson cited the Ukrainian president's visit to a Pennsylvania shell production facility as the reason for his demand. He stated that not a single Republican was invited there, thus the tour was clearly a partisan campaign event designed to help Democrats and is clearly election interference. Thank you for listening to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, when a commercial initiative of just two people, and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the app, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we are getting better. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.